to the Reorderboard Qualification 96 tutorial special. I never intended to put my voice on these videos, but I'm sure you've worked out from the title what we're going to be covering today. I've had a few emails and a few comments on a handful of the videos that sort of said, how do you make these? What are you using? And hopefully that'll answer some of these questions. And also we'll get to display the data set from the non-broadcast, so it was never seen on television or radio, pre-qualifying round for 96. It was pretty controversial, and you'll be able to see at the end of the video how those points stacked up. And of course, just a quick chance to say thank you to all those who've liked and subscribed and watched the video so far. I just started putting them on YouTube because I thought it would give me a point in doing the project. I never thought I would have so many views. It's November as I'm posting this. I've had nearly 44,000 views over the channel. You've all spent nearly 7,000 minutes watching this content. I assume it's content that you've mainly seen before, but I'm hopefully my boards are adding a bit of a new angle to them. And I think really with all the regular people that comment on the bottom of them, I think we've actually got like a really good resource of Eurovision history building. So I'm really pleased about that, and I never expected it. So thanks for watching. So by 96, the EBU had now 30 countries who wanted to take part in the Eurovision Song Contest. If you're wondering where 30 came from, it's because North Macedonia, or as we used to call it, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, had entered and wanted to enter in 1996, so that makes around 30. There's sort of a bit of anecdotal evidence that Bulgaria may have been included as well on the ballot papers for the juries, but their name was crossed out, and then Bulgaria didn't end up joining the contest for another 9 years. But the qualification round certainly did prove controversial, both for its results and also its methods. But we do have data. The EBU made the data available so we can see who won it. So it's a really good way. Nobody's probably ever seen how these points totted up to get the 23 contestants that would make it through to Oslo. Okay, so I've opened up Viz Artist. This is what it looks like, and this is the tool that I use. The reason I use it is because I use it professionally, and I work at a broadcaster, and this is probably the #1 live rendering software, particularly in Europe and in Asia. There are a few more different competitors in North America, but it's still widely used in North America as well. And it does lots of special things, but you can download it. It's free, and what they've done is they've switched off all the stuff that would allow you to connect it to a live TV situation, because that gets pretty expensive. But you can download it and play with it, which is exactly what I do. So I'll just briefly guide you around what you're looking at. You can see I've loaded the 92 board. This is how it ended up actually. You'll see these sort of crosshairs over it. These are all bounding boxes, and so I actually switch them off when I'm doing a recording, but it'll be handy for you to see what I'm clicking at. So that's the actual graphic that you've got here. That's all made up of little container trees which you make. You can see that things get sort of slightly complicated, but in general you can drag a container. And then up here, you've got all of the stuff that you might need in a scene. So I can go to geometry plugins and I can add a cube. There we go. And then I'll just drag it over here. You can see everything's 3D. I'll just right click and add some material. So you can then see that it's live in the scene there. And this is the big difference between this and After Effects. Right, because I'm just scrolling that round. There's no pre-rendering to do. I don't have to render it and then look at it afterwards. It's just there. It's rendering it a frame before you need to see it. So that's really the core. That's the basis of any scene. And you can see what I was doing there. Every item has this panel at the top here where you can start to change the parameters of it. You can make it big or large. I've rotated it, but you can do it on any axis. And then I guess the next big part. I mean, obviously the scope of this video, I can't show you everything about Viz because there's people that train for 4 or 5 days at it just to get a basic understanding of it. So I'm just sort of doing a very quick overview. And this is the stage area, which is where, so if you're in After Effects, this is usually at the bottom of the screen. But this is essentially where all your keyframing is done. So if we go to this is a director that I've named, and you can see you can scrub along. Again, there's no pre-rendering, there's nothing, you know, I've often used After Effects on perhaps computers that are a bit slow. So you can do amazing things in After Effects, but it's not instant like Viz. So I can play this now, so I can just press play. And you'll see, you might recognise this is my intro to the board. Now, obviously got my cube in it as well, and I could put my cube at the end there, up here. There's many ways of actually putting animation in, but I could do scaling up to 2. I could run that over here. It will look a complete mess, but let's go back to the beginning and play the director again, and you'll see as you can see, the red line will hit and it will start scaling the cube up right to the end. Ignore how some things are some things are in front of the cube and some things are behind the cube. That's all to do with how the board animates and stops it. I need to stop it sort of clipping and looking bad when things are animated. So I could probably guess from here that Malta, Greece and Iceland have probably just had points awarded in the last round because of that masking. So we'll delete that. Just a bit of a general overview. Like I said, I can't really go in very deep about what Viz is, but it's a live renderer. It's used quite widely for this type of graphic, for any sort of live data situation. So when you see a lot of the scoreboards on the internet are often made in After Effects or maybe even PowerPoint, and it's not they're not bad graphical tools. I mean, PowerPoint less so, but you can achieve quite a lot. But when you're doing something like this, when you sort of get to like 93 and you've got nearly 1,500 points to award, you've got a lot of repetition, and that's what I see in a lot of even the really good looking boards. It's just a human thing. It's not really a fault finding thing, but it's just you're going to make mistakes in the repetition, because if the country that you've got let's say for example the country that performed last gets 1 point in the first round, you've then got to animate all of the elements on the board, and you've got to do that, although you can script a bit in After Effects, you've got to do that sort of by hand and keyframe it all, and that can take a lot of time. So that's why this is the best tool. And I had a question on my last video about whether it's actually sort of accepting data, and that is true, it is. I don't care what the actual points were in history, even though I know it's fixed data, for example, but you approach it as if you're going to turn up at the actual Eurovision Song Contest and not know what points are awarded. So every item on this board can accept any number of points and can be in any position. If we had relegation, then you could, I don't think about it in terms of, Spain is never going to be relegated this year, so I don't need to add the relegation part of the graphic to it. You sort of build it, and it's just as easy to do it like this. You build it as if anything can happen, which is exactly what live TV is all about, right? This is taken off Viz's website, and if you go there and search for Viz Artist, you'll find more information about the software. By the way, I'm not being paid by them, and I absolutely have no role in advertising what they do. I use them every day, and I'll talk briefly in a second about how else you could achieve this without using this software. But this is essentially the process. So you can have sort of two inputs where I'm sort of building everything in Viz as much as possible. I am using some other third-party software. You'll notice in my descriptions for 93, I used like a 3D modeling. I used Blender basically to get a ribbon. And that was mainly because in my built-ins, I couldn't find anything that could do the ribbon exactly how I wanted to. I was looking at, say, spring and other things, but I couldn't find exactly what I wanted. But Viz is really good at allowing you to import other things from other programs. So you'll see this is my image library, so there's lots of things, some things I used and some things I didn't. You might see, there we go, so ribbon 2, I don't know if that's the one I used. So I drag that in, I don't know what it'll look like, it's very small. But you can see that's the ribbon I used in 93. It didn't rotate it like that at all, I probably rotated it on the X. But that was built in another program, so there's all that opportunity if you need it. So for this part, I'm mainly not using videos, but this is certainly where After Effects would come in. And when you see modern boards at the moment, you will probably see the really nice backgrounds with really nice glittery effects and all sorts of things like that. That's almost certainly not made in Viz. It's probably made in software that can pre-render and add all these really nice effects. Not that you can't do lots of nice things in Viz, it's just often that designers are more comfortable with After Effects. And then we've got the symbol in the middle, that is artist, that's exactly what we're using here, and where I'm doing all the designing and scripting, which we'll come on to a bit. Basically this bottom branch here is the bit that's shut off in the free version. That's how you connect to TV. But the top bit is quite interesting because this is where it's got a little journalist hat there, and that is basically how you put data into the graphic. It says a journalist hat because, say, if you're a journalist doing a quote or something, you'd have to type in the quote to a bit of software that would then show it live in Artist. What are we doing with that? Well, we've got a lot of static data, but how I tend to record them is I play the sequence and I sort of behave like a graphics operator in that I'm listening to, say, Mary Kennedy and the spokespeople, and I apply the points as they come in. Obviously, it's not a live program because it happened years ago, so if I make a mistake, I can start again. For the rest of the control, this is where this project differs from a live situation, is that I'm going to be doing it all in the scene and just not showing the rest of the artist GUI. So if we click here, under my graphics on my master, I have a script. Now, a script is just a container plugin you can drag in. It basically gives you I click edit. Here's my script. That's all the scripts that I've written in order for this board. As you can see, some things are commented out, but this is most of the script. And some of the script allows you to do a little bit of a basic GUI, and you can probably work out, here are my countries, and then some other function buttons, and here are my points, and that's how I award the points. So for this, what I'll do is, just to show you that it works, I'll do setup board. This is the routine that I do when I start. So it's probably going to clear everything on the board and set it back right at the beginning of the show. So let's do that. Okay. So what looks different is there I had rank in, which is the ranking column. So if I just click rank out, it will animate them out in a weird position. But I think if I do rank in, it will put them all back in the right order. So that's fine. So I've now cleared down the board and we'll get into what it does next. So before we get into the board, I did say I would just mention about different ways of approaching this if you didn't want to use Viz Artist like I'm using. And one of the most obvious ones is probably HTML and JavaScript. Animations within a web browser are becoming better and better. There's no real 3D elements yet, or there are some coming. It's not as advanced as some of the broadcast level tools, obviously, but they are certainly starting to play a role in the broadcast world. So I think it would be great if people were actually looking at it. I mean, all these tools are free, and also they have this great advantage of having a wealth of support across the internet. So you could actually find quite a lot more out. There is support from Viz. I mean, the scripting that we use, that uses VB script, and there is some documentation, but VB script is quite an old scripting language, so it would be great to see someone using sort of HTML, CSS and JavaScript to create a web-based solution that is of broadcast quality. So it's got that detailing, and that's where, if you remember the previous slide, where you would actually start inputting stuff from other software, say After Effects and things like that. And the other thing to consider, and what's also coming into the broadcast world, is the gaming engines. They tend to just be sort of educational or instructional sections. So I've seen things for the Weather Channel that explain like different speeds of hurricane, for example, so something like that doesn't really have live data coming into it in the same way that a scoreboard would. But there's also lots of studios, sort of VR studios being built that you would struggle to tell that aren't sort of real, wood and glass. So that's something to think about, particularly in the view with what's coming in '96 and the Blue Room. Obviously, we never really saw virtual reality again, or haven't so far seen virtual reality in Eurovision. So, but who knows, maybe it will come back in an ultra-realistic style. Okay, so let's start with the nitty-gritty then. And if you're still with me, well done. I hope it's not going to be too difficult to follow. So this has to start with some static data, basically, because we need to know what the countries are and what the song names are and everything like that. And so for that, I start off with good old Excel. And as you can see, we've got all the countries that are in that contest. Obviously, this one's in Swedish, so I have another one which says country name. So actually, column B is just used for calling up the flags. So I know some of you are interested in that. So here I have all my flags. Don't worry, it's called 1980. It's just because it was from the first project. So they're my square flags, my circular flags, and then I have my rectangular flags, and then I have a little folder with just my old ones that we don't need anymore for various reasons. So that's essentially what's first happening in there. Ignore all these numbers. These are to do with where in the positioning on the scene the countries start off, if that makes sense. And then you can see here, these are the song names and the artist names. After Excel, what we do is I just push it through Notepad or Notepad++, just a sort of a text editor, and it ends up here in the scene. So you can see this is like the sort of first line of that Excel spreadsheet, and then that other group of numbers is just there. And like I said, you can see that 0, 0, and you'll find that song 1, its position is 0, 0. Belgium are 23.2 points below, so song 2, if I click on the positional thing, there you go. You'll see that they're 23 points below. And then it gets more complicated when you get down to the columns. There's a lot in this one, 13, 14. There we go. So you can see these are 236 points away. But you can sort of start to see how we might get onto the logic of rearranging. Essentially, you've got to get that country to the right position. And that's why we need that static data there. So as I explained, you can see a little bit of my GUI, what you'd call GUI, and this is what I use as an operator when I'm making the scoreboards. It's really fun. I really enjoy this bit. And I've got a number of different things I can do. And this is just to make it easier because obviously the tape is rolling quite quickly. So let's start as if we were in 1992, and I'm going to click on Spain, and then I'm going to set voting country. Okay, and as you can see, what that's done is put the phone that I always use, and it's changed Spain to yellow. So let's just see what that's done. And it's done a load of things in the script, and so this is where I'm not going to go sort of deeply into syntax, because I don't think it would be, if you're just sort of approaching it as a newbie, it's probably a bit alienating. So I'm just going to talk in code blocks, if you know what I mean, and then hopefully you can go off and do your own thing. I've got a director called set voting country, and it's essentially, if I drag this back, you'll see Spain goes white again, and then I play it again and it'll go yellow. So it's quite easy to find because it's at the top, but you can see I've changed the material, and you'll notice these keyframes are named. If you can see that little pop-up there, This keyframe is called mat2, and you can also see it over this part of the screen here. So you can see it's gone yellow, and if I click on mat1, it's white. And then also, much more easy, you can see the phone, it's alpha, which means whether it's visible or not. That was 0 there, and then it animates to 1 over there. And all we're doing is just running that directory as far as that. Essentially, there's another button in my control, which will say end voting country. And so in this block of script and in these directors, it is everything you need to do at the beginning of a round of voting and then at the end of the round of voting. So at the beginning, it's quite simple because you just need to turn the phone on and colour the country a particular colour. At the end of the round, what you need to do is lots of things really. You need to sort of keep the colour of the country yellow, so everyone knows that they have voted. Then what we need to do in this particular board, as the points were awarded, parts of the board changed colour. And what you want to do is clear all that down at this stage. So just really see this section as somewhere, like I said, anything you want to do at the beginning and the end of the voting rounds. One of the other things that happens when I set up the board is it runs through a bit of code called initialize. One of the things it's doing is converting all of this data into a structure. So VB scripts allows you to have structures. And if I just show you what the structure looks like in my text editor, it's called entry, as in song entry. And this is about a syntax as we're going to get, hopefully. Essentially what I do is I go through and convert all this data you can see up here into an entry. And that's 1 per country, and then we add it into an array. So let's just show you how that might be organised. So I call the array competition, that sort of makes sense. Or you could call it Eurovision or whatever. And it has an array which is just a collection of items, and each of those items is a structure. So for example, in the first entry, we'll have Spain, there will be the country name will be Spanian, sorry, I don't speak Swedish. The rank, well, I go on the first item, so the rank will be 1 to start off. So Spain is leading the competition without any points being awarded, but that's just based on its running order. Points will be 0, and then you can see down here, I'm actually recording every type of point that is being awarded. So if somebody gets awarded a 1, this counts up 1. And what is an integer? Well, an integer is just a single number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A double is a number that has a decimal point to it. So you'll see it's start position Y and start position X, and they're these numbers, which you can see have decimal points in. Okay, so we're going to go back and set Spain as the voting country. And we know what that's done in the director. But what I wanted to show you in this director is this keyframe here, because these are quite important. These are called action keyframes, and you can get them by just dragging a new action there, and you give it a name. And then you can add a keyframe using this button here. And then you get this little bit of text, which is what I've got. So I'm just going to delete that because I've already got an end of voting one. And this syntax is basically just allowing you can see it says this scene, the tree, which is this bit here. Go to something called master, which is what I keep my main script on. And then it's going to invoke a piece of script called end of voting. And this is part of the core functionality of how I use Viz and how it allows it to be quite a powerful tool, and it stops you from having to do all of the repetition that you might get in After Effects. So let's go ahead. I know it's taken us a long time to get here, but let's give Belgium 1 point. So I'm going to click Belgium, and I'm going to click 1 point, and it's going to do that. I know you've already seen this. So I'm just going to talk about what happened there. It now asks it to play a points director, and you can see each country has its own director. And you can see by the red line that number 2 has now been played. So if I go like that, you'll see it'll go backwards, and then I can play again. And this is just how I've arranged, and this is totally, if you were going to do one, how you could do it exactly how you would like to do it. Again, it's got another action keyframe. This is actually one that I've stopped because you'll notice that it's not rearranged. So I'm going to talk about the rearranging in a minute. And you'll see just like really core things. So if I can click that, it will take me to the bit where I am. So we're in song number 2. Swedish value, that's where I've put that in the script. And I've just set it there. It's got a bit of glow on it and stuff like that. So if you click on it, you'll get all of the list of things. So you can take the glow off if you want to. It's been masked into this box. If I took that off and played it, you would see it come crash over the flag. So we use that mask just to stop it being seen. And then just really important, I'll just use it on something really basic. You can see I've got a point A and a point B. So that's point A with the green around it. I'm going to, when I award my point, which I've done via that button, I tell point B to show a number 1. So if I now switch off the win mask there, so you can see it, it looks a bit annoying because it's in front of the other one. You'll see that it's set there, and then that allows that animation for it to slide in. So the alternative is I could have just written 1 point straight to point B, but what you'd get is a cut. It would just change. And that's something in the RTE sort of boards in the real world in 93, 94, 95. They were using software called Aston, which is sort of a precursor, is a really good typeface editor actually. It didn't really have much animation. You could do some wipes and things, but it explains why the boards and all the numbers cut, because that's what you would do. You would find the right box, type in the number and press update, or whatever the command was. You had these big cherry keyboards and it would just cut on. And that's exactly what was happening in the Irish contests. So if I put my win mask back on, you'll see that look more accurate. But it's got the same thing. It's got a keyframe there, and what that keyframe will then be doing is setting the 1 to point A, if that makes sense. So as the point comes in, I set the value to points B, it runs the animation, and then at the end, if it was switched on, point A would be showing 1. And so that way, the next time Belgium gets a point, it won't start off from 0 again. So let's just prove that. So we're going to end that voting. It's very short round there, where Spain just gave 1 point. And we're going to skip Belgium just for the point of this. And we're going to make Israel the voting country, and we're going to give Belgium another point. And you'll see now that the 1 turns into a 2. If you didn't do that copying and pasting, you would see 0 again, and it would go from 0 to 2, which would not be what we wanted to say. And here's just a quick visual representation, because we'll see this more and more in the scene. You have a starting point, an end point. You often set the end point, and then at the end, once it's run the director, you'll copy back the value that's set in B back to A. Okay, so we're getting nearer to the point where we're going to do 96, but this is just to show you the core bit of what the scene is doing and the whole reason for the reorderboard channel, really. And that is to get these numbers reordering and constantly being in a rank position. So 1 is at the top, 2 is next, 3 follows on. What we had before was Belgium being awarded 1 point, and I've now switched on the rearrange. But let's just go back to our data structure within the code and what would happen when Belgium is awarded 1 point. So as you can see, its points is 1, its rank is 2, whereas Spain has no points, and its rank is 1. So what we now do is we get this structure arranged in an order. So to be precise, we're rearranging the array of structures. Okay, so the competition, what we're doing is ordering the competition. And I'll show you, there's several ways that you can achieve this in other code, but in VisScript there's only really one way, and I've called it quite funnily Eurosort. And essentially what this does is a sort of bubble sorting. Now I don't know a lot about bubble sorting, but it's essentially it takes two entries. So our entries are Spain and Belgium, but it will actually go through all of them, all 23, and it will ask, am I higher or lower than the next one? If I am, return a -1 if I'm lower, a 1 if I'm higher, or a 0 if I'm the same. So you can start to see here now that the rules of the competition, and therefore the rules of the board, are written here. Now, don't be put off by this big tree of code, but essentially what it's saying is the point. So this is how you call up a section of the structure. So A in this case will be Spain, and B will be Belgium. And we say, does the points of Spain, is it bigger than the points of Belgium? If it isn't or is, then -1. But then I also say, so the end of that is there, so we return a 1 if it's the other way around. But if they're the same, if the points are the same, then we start asking more detailed questions, and this is where you get to a sort of 1991 scenario. You say, how many 12s do Spain and Belgium have? Because if one of them, we know they've got the same points, but if one of them has more 12s, then put it higher than the other one. And then we get into the situation, well, what if the 12s are the same? How many 10s do they have? And this is literally what was happening at the last end, or the final part of the 1991 contest, where the points were the same, the 12s were the same, but the 10s were different, therefore Sweden won. However, so you might think, well, that's a real edge case. Is this code ever used? Well, it's actually used all the time, because at the beginning of the scoreboard, what you're doing is still asking all these questions, and because every country is working out where it should be. And of course, if you've got a board where only, as we have right now, we've only got Belgium with 1 point, most of these values are 0, so it is getting all the way down to the logic. And if you follow it down, it asks how many 8s, 7s, 6s, 5s, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then it says, well, if all of that is the same, then what's the running order? Is the running order higher or lower? So that gives you a clue of how I work it out, because if all of them are the same, what it means is, in this first point, all we're swapping is Spain and Belgium. All the others are going to get an answer of, oh, I'm exactly the same position. I just need to stay where I was. So you get the effect of only the countries that have had points awarded move, all the others stay the same. So going back to our board, because I've had to re-add the code, I've had to sort of clear it back to the beginning again. So we're going to set Spain as a voting country, and we're going to give Belgium 1 point. So it's running that director as we thought, and now it's running another director, which is rearrange. And so what is the rearrange doing? And just to confirm where that is again, it was at the end of the points, it was triggered on this action keyframe. And that's going to rearrange, and it's essentially going to run our rearrange director. Now, we use what we were talking about, the director running along, and then it gets to the end, and then there's another keyframe here. And what's going to be quite hard to explain is that this keyframe actually copies a lot of the values back, so it looks like it's not run at all. But what it has done is it's run once and then copied everything back. But let's just go theoretically about what has happened. So we've sorted the data, and now we've asked what the new rank is. So this is what the rearrange code is doing. It's going through each and every item on the board, all 23, and saying, what is your new rank after you've had your points awarded? And in Belgium's case, it said 1, as we know from this slide. But its current position is 2. So therefore, it then goes through and says, is your new rank, which is 1, higher than your current rank, which is 2? So the answer for that is true. And in which case it asks some questions about whether it needs to move columns, and we'll go into that in a second. And if not, it says, well, animate to the point where you're supposed to be, and it uses this piece of data here. So it knows, oh, you should be in rank 1, so you need to go to 0, 0, which is essentially what this end point will be. So there you go. So this was minus 23, and you'll see on song 1 that this was 0 but is now minus 23.2. So just to clarify, it's moved Belgium up, but of course it's also moved Spain down at the same point. Now it looks a bit confusing, so what you would expect to see is just 2 keyframes there. Now I've got some extra ones because this is how complicated it gets. So I'll just try and explain to you what would happen if we gave Switzerland a point, which of course we can do in a second, but I'll just go through. I've already got Switzerland open here. You don't need to see that. So if Switzerland was going to be awarded 2 points, it would then need to go where Belgium is. But earlier I talked about just moving from A to B, so I could just have 2 keyframes that say start here and then move to 0, 0. And essentially that is going to be the end point. It's going to be 0. So we've got keyframes in an odd position, but it's essentially going there. Obviously Belgium's not got out of the way because we've not told it to do anything. But in order to get a nice transition, what I'm doing is actually saying this middle keyframe, I'm going to use this middle keyframe. I'm going to set it to, we know it's 23.2 for each sort of height of each item. I'm going to put it up there. Now it looks like it's disappeared, and that's only because I'm masking it off. I'm masking the whole board off. If I take it off, it's actually just appeared up there. And then what I do in the script is move the timing of this keyframe to over here. And this keyframe is not going to be in column 1, 2, 3, 6. It's actually going to go over there. So where are we now? We are... Oh, we haven't moved. Oh, that's because I'm there. So it's now there. Now that's a bit too early for where we want it, but what we want to do for this keyframe is actually set it all the way down here. And if I switch my mask back on, you won't see it. So now what we've got is it moves up and then goes to the bottom and then moves up there. And there's lots of little things which I can't go into this video about weighting and speed control, about making movement more anamorphic, which is the idea that, you know, if you rolled a ball along a table, it wouldn't go at a constant speed. It would sort of slow down because of gravity and all sorts of physics, I suppose. And you can sort of replicate that by using some keyframe controllers, but that's sort of something for you to explore as you get on. Now you can see the obvious problem is that if I run that, I don't want that to, let's just stop that from triggering. Now if I run that, you can see, it hasn't stopped it triggering, never mind. So it's copied it away. So let me just get that back. Okay, so I think I've got it back now to what it was. I thought just sort of changing the text of that would stop it from running, but it hasn't. So never mind. So this is basically what it's doing, and as you can see it moving because I can't mask over the other boards because you wouldn't see them all. So you can see here active what I do in the code again, and this is where Viz becomes a bit like, and you do it in other software as well. It's just a bit of magic basically. So you stop it from being seen over those 2 frames, and as you can see by the time we're literally talking less than a point of a second. So it will now be switched off until it hits this point here. So there you go. So if I moved that there, you would see it would suddenly appear there. So really I want it there. And now it's switched on again. So we can see in the bounding box appearing there, but when you actually play it out, you would have the bounding boxes switched off, so you wouldn't see it. And then it will run it up to there. And that's essentially the basis of how we reorder, but obviously it looks a bit messy there, because at exactly the same time that I've spent doing that for song 13, it's actually going to, in the case of Switzerland, you're going to be applying animation to all of the other countries in column 1 to all move down 1, and in the same complicated way that Switzerland has traversed the 2 columns, Finland will have to traverse the column the other way to get into position 13. So let me just reset and we'll show you that. So here we go. I'm now ready to give Switzerland 2 points, and you'll see everything in action. So it will play that first. It gets to the end of the first director. Then all the others have started to play their directors at the same time. And this is really what I've been finessing over each project, is that timing. You saw all the others sort of dim down. Then we had some masking issues because actually they were all doing this on the same Z plane, so it looked a bit messy, so I need to move some of them back or switch some masking off. And I won't go in, I've sort of just briefly talked about it there, but I won't sort of explain how I've done that. It's just a lot of coding basically, and it's a great example of how coding in a scene can actually make it really powerful and stops you having to do all of this stuff by hand, which essentially is where the mistakes can come in. So we're finally at the point now where I'm going to start dismantling this board and making it ready for our 1996 pre-selection. So the first thing we can get rid of course, is the boat. We'll get rid of the stars as well, but I'll leave them on for a bit. You might be asking how I've done certain other things. The cloth flag, for example, you can see song 13 now. I've set some keyframes again with the timing that replaced the cloth flag, which is a nice little plugin there, so you can sort of do all sorts of things, and you can animate you can make it do different things, and you can keyframe that. So there you go, I've made the flag flap a bit differently, I suppose is the word. There's also and again, just to underline that point about how templated this is in a way, there's also the 2D flag is still there. And what the end of the rearrange for this particular board is doing is saying, well, if your new rank is 1, fade off the static flag and fade on the cloth flag. But every country in this board has an animated flag waiting there to be shown, so it's not a case of just doing it by hand. So that's what I'm going to do, and how I start by... Seems a bit dramatic, but again, just to underline the point, how you don't. There is a repetition, but you want to apply everything once. Is I take song 2 to 23, and I delete them, and then what that does is just gives me one song to focus on. I don't have all the clutter in the directors. All the directors now empty. I can focus on that, think about the spacing and stuff like that, and that's what I'm going to do next. Okay, so that probably wasn't the most complete time lapse, I ended up feeling really conscious that it was recording everything I was doing on the computer. So when I got to the coding phase, which is just me sort of tweaking the code, running it, seeing if it fixes things, there'd be lots of sort of white flashes as my code editor came on screen. So I decided not to show all of that, but I've got it to a certain point now. It's the busiest board that I've made, I think. And we're obviously following sort of my house style for the channel. This is really not a broadcast thing, is it? So I've just gone straight back to how we were. So it's a little bit like 92, but even more stripped down. I think it needed to be stripped down because we've got so many countries in there, and I also wanted to make sure that I had Norway as an automatic qualifier on there. We're not quite finished with where we are, so but what I can do is I can set Austria as a voting country, so it's sort of slightly greyed out. There's no need for a telephone. I'm not sure actually how the juries presented their votes, whether it was over telephone or not, or whether they just sent back the paperwork. But we'll just try giving Bosnia a point. Okay, so it's doing a couple of things that I don't want it to do at the minute. And that is, I'm trying to make it look like the League of Champions sort of side graphic that I do at the end. I actually do that by hand. I haven't coded that before, where it just sort of highlights the country on the move up. And in my code, what I've done is I've said, if any are rearranging, then make that background appear. And just to show you where that is in the director. So in each of their rearrange directors, what we've got is this base which comes along and plays. What we want it to do is only do that animation for the country that's moving up, not the country that moves down. So if we then try and give Ireland 2 points, I've got a funny feeling they'll be getting more than 2 points, but let's see what happens. Yeah. Okay, so we've got a couple of things happening there. You saw that glitch. That's probably what we were talking about earlier, about how it moves from one column to another. So I'm just going to check my precise timings on when those action keyframes are set. Sorry, not the action keyframes, these keyframes of whether it's showing or not. And then obviously we saw that all those bars appear, so we don't want that. And then you might be thinking, well, there's a hell of a wait before anything happens. It doesn't look that great. And that's what I'm going to do next as well, off camera. So I'll show you what's happening once it's built. But if I go to a finished director, you'll see I've got nothing happening. So that would be off, yeah. Until exactly 2 seconds, and then the points count up. Okay, so and to do the points, we're doing it slightly different to how I was doing it in 92. We've got a little, there's a handy counter plugin, which just allows you to animate points counting up. So what I'm going to do is use this area. So usually what I try and do is fix into the 4x3 safe area. This is actually what these guides are showing aren't 4x3 safe, but they might be actually. I think it's no. I think it should be smaller than that, and that's because the footage around it has often got black bars down the side because it was filmed in 4x3, or certainly broadcast in 4x3, because it's from the 90s. But because this show hasn't been broadcast on television and I've got no other footage that I'm sort of snapping in between, I'm going to do a queue of points over here, and they're going to fly on, and so you might start to work out how that's going to work. Okay, here we are. After a bit of messing around and sorting things out, we now have, if I set Austria as a voting country, we now have a queue of points that arrive at the side of the board. They're a bit basic looking, but this is sort of the theme of this particular video. And now what I can do is I can award Belgium a point, for example. Fly to the middle and then land on Belgium, and then do the rearrange routine. And as you can see, I fixed that issue we had earlier where all of the countries that were rearranging were showing that white bar. Now it's just the country that's going up. Now, what makes this slightly complicated is just getting that position right, basically, because what I can do is just play this director and unaward the point. Now you can see where the keyframes have been set by my code to actually go where Belgium was, not where it is now. And this is where the 2 seconds of nothing happening in the points director is important. So you'll see, I'm playing Bosnia now, like we saw earlier, nothing happens for 2 seconds and then the point will appear. That's because both of these directors, because of what I've told them in the code to do, are playing at exactly the same time. So the points director will start playing and this cue director will start playing at the same time. So what you're looking at, or what the viewer is looking at, is the points flying onto the center of the screen and then to the right point. We then get to exactly 2 seconds and it's arrived at where the point is being switched on in the points director. Now, why do we need to do that? Because also just to add, a frame later, it snaps off. And that's because it's a rearranging board, right? I could add a load of keyframes here that would keep that same bit of geometry, as we call it, this one here, flying up with Belgium. But I don't need to do that because I can just switch it off. I've switched it on in the director in the points board, and then it can fly away with it as it reaches its new destination. And this sort of, just to tie up really, is sort of the key themes of how I build things in this program, but also just to get you thinking about how you might approach something similar if you're using another program or you've got another way of doing it, is this thought that you essentially building it templated, so you're not dependent on any particular result, which does make it sort of cuts down all of that repetition that you might need otherwise. So I can do anything now. I could give Turkey 2 points, and I might give, just for good fun, I'll give Gina G 12 points. And again, the board knew exactly what to do. It didn't matter that I had skipped 3 to 10. Obviously, it looks a bit weird because they're still here. So that's one of the cool things, sort of building it so it operates properly. And then secondly is all this sort of visual trickery. Now I've kept this board quite simple in its look. Hopefully it looks nice enough. But you can see where you could start to layer up different effects and different shapes and things like that. But for now, I think that's it. It's been quite a lengthy how-to section, which I hopefully has just covered sort of quite broad themes. I know I've specifically talked about Viz and how I'm building it, but hopefully it's teed off some thoughts about how you might approach your own board. Shortly, you're going to see the full sequence of points. I'm going to change it a little bit to make it a bit shorter. I'm going to reward 1 to 10 automatically and then 12 separately, a bit like how they do the jury votings in the current Eurovision Song Contest final sequence. And that will hopefully speed it up a bit because we've got 29 rounds to get through. I'll post a little bit about what the outcome of this pre-selection was in the description. And if you're thinking about building your own and this video has seemed a little bit too much, don't worry. I think I'm coming at it with quite a few months experience of doing this particular product, and then I'm also got quite a lot of professional experience behind me. So if you are just starting out or want to do something cold like this, then pick the technology that you want to do and just start small. I started doing this project about a year ago and I just wanted to do 1998 as a board, and it was far too difficult. I gave up. What I ended up doing was starting something much simpler. I'll do my best to answer any questions you might have in the comments, but otherwise thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of the content on the reorder board.